Kena, wajib nonokor, nyon, karek, nyongamor, kayang karek, nija, maneng budja. So what I've just said there, hello and welcome, my name is Kelly Fluke. I just said hello to you all, welcome to here. I'm very happy to be here and pay my respects to the Meneng people who are the traditional custodians of this land we stand on. So, a bit of background to myself. I'll try not to move this mic around too much. My mother's a Noongar woman from the country we call Wadjaroo. This is Meneng to the roughly the Palamute River. To the east of here, some 130 odd k's. My great-grandfather was born at a place called Parlinga in around the 1870s. Parlinga's where the mouth of the river looks like a tongue. A lot of you know there's the Palamute history. My grandfather was born at Bremer Bay, come from a spiritual home, in about 1912. He's seen the last of the Noongar initiation ceremonies in 1926. He was one of the boys that were going to put through the practice before they officially outlawed it. My mother was actually born at Noongar Mission in 1936. Anyway, enough of me. That's a bit of my background from the last side of things. Obviously, my dad's not gone. I recently looked at my work with Deep Herd and where I was going with things, and I was thinking about reflecting what I was going to say today. And I thought, well, it's an interesting journey because a lot of the conversation I'm listening to, the room here today, very reverberate, very succinctly and neatly with what we are trying to do as what I'm trying to do with the Noongar landholders across the southwest region. I am a project manager with the Department of Primary Industry and Regional Development, as we call it now. I started that journey some 15 years back with the former Department of Agriculture and Food WA. I was employed at the time to head up a new initiative with the state government in recognition there was a growing Indigenous or Noongar or Aboriginal estate in the southwest, to create an engagement framework and bring them into it, catchment planning and provide some policy guidance on how we might service support the growing Noongar estate. It's been an interesting journey. I committed for 5 years, but the whole process evolved and there's so much work to be done. I'm still here 15 years on, only just that. I originally started with 6 properties in the South Coast region, which align with the Catchment Council, so you know the South Coast and a lot of you. A lot of my early work was supporting them set up their catchment planning processes. In fact, the work I was doing here was replicated in the Blackwood, or the Southwest Catchment Council, the Avon, Swan, and the rangelands, the model we set up here in the south. So there's a lot of innovations going in this particular region. So I started with 6 properties. In 2004, the original investment plan, HT back then, completed. I was then picked up by the Department of Agriculture to look at the farm specifically, because that was kind of the hardest thing. So we parked up the natural, cultural and environmental estates and that capacity with the Catchment Council, and I stayed with agriculture looking at farms. So we started with 6, but the problem with that was once I became fully employed by the department, my brief for my region expanded across Noongar country. So within a 2-year period, I had 24 farms, which kind of made me wonder what I was doing. But look, part of the early thinking was always around, well, look, we've got a Noongar mob, or mort, now acquiring land again, it's agricultural land, but there's clearly a gap in their knowledge and understanding around modern agriculture and how to really, probably how they should be thinking about managing the land, what they should actually be doing in their business thinking, business modelling, business operating systems, all that sort of technical stuff. So one of the first things I did was set out about really mapping the landscape, mapping their properties, really looking at what was going on with that property as a way of informing people, really introducing them to the knowledge they needed and required to actually understand how to manage the basic things about their properties, the insurances, and some of the threatening processes and the greater landscapes and all that sort of stuff. So we systematically went through the whole estate. process that took nearly 7.5 years. So some 23 management plans later, we've really, collected all the detail and the data, and there's been a whole range of work done on the geologies, the soils, and the water resources, and all of the degraded landscapes, and salinity and soil compaction and all that stuff you guys know very well. So really understanding what we're up against. And it was quite challenging because we realised at the outset that the Noongar estate, if I'll call it that, was one that was unfortunately probably overburdened with previous farming practices, and probably, I use the term, flopped out and sold in the market cheap. So yeah, it was a massive kind of a gig to take on, but with the right support from government and good technical people that I was able to rely on, we slowly turned that conversation around. We started to engage people and inform people. So we got to a point, probably about 2012, where they were able to really understand, that their land and what was good and bad about it, and really find their thinking around their business vision then. Because a lot of it's really the social capital stuff we had to work with, getting cohesive decision making, governance, business governance versus community governance. All that sort of journey was in the earlier part of the conversation. And we had some great support from technical skills in the department. And there are people like Timmy Overhoy, somewhere in there, Tim, who was a great strength. And, his knowledge in soils is particularly interesting, and soils is what we're about today. But so around 2012-13, we started to look at how we're going to move forward into the next level. And so I decided to stay on with the department at that time, and really look at refining our thinking and the natural evolution of this business we're involved in. And so we started to think about concepts around, leadership groups, or really moving to consolidate our position, limited resources of government, etc., and targeting those groups that really want to go into business. They had a strong economic vision. So it was around 2012-13 I started thinking outside the box again a bit and come up with this concept around a producer group. It's not new, those producer groups exist everywhere. But the fact was, as I sort of researched that thinking and that conversation, I think we realised that in Australia there were no other Aboriginal producer groups. There are different forms and shapes, like Kimberley Cattle Associations and whatnot, but there was no such thing as a Noongar Aboriginal producer group in Australia. So the Noongar Land Enterprise is that first Australian attempt, but it is more than an attempt. We've now formally launched that. It had a launch by Minister McTiernan back in March this year in Cootish Place in North Bend. We're a not-for-profit incorporated body. We have our own CEO, business manager, secretary support. My role is very much aligned to supporting the continuation of that opportunity. And it's really around driving a vision of sustainability. Really about looking at how we can take these farms forward. Yes, we need agricultural production systems in the thinking somewhere, so the sheep, wheat, cattle stuff, but it's not at the expense of just more crops, more animals, more melioration, more soil sterilisation, all that stuff. So really the NLE is really the journey now to really consolidate thinking. And one of the really powerful positive things for me as a Noongar person also is that overwhelmingly the Noongar guys want to move more into a more, we call it a cultural, traditional worldview. We still need the good science, the Western science, and there's plenty of great science in this room, intelligence. So the regenerative ag concept fits very succinctly in that with our thinking about the future. So we want to bring back healthy landscapes, we want to repair the country, we want to work with basic concept and LMUs, understanding what's going on, putting the good microbes and the microbiomes and that stuff back is essential for us. But the key message for us is we are really driving an agenda which is driven by cultural knowledge as well. So cultural product development, and Noongar product development in particular, is where we're at to keep the economy up, increase our economy, increase more social benefit and opportunities for our people on the properties. So move away from a monoculture mainstream farming concept with mum and dad and a couple of kids, where we can have several farms, having several families deriving enough income, more socially intact communities. And so bush foods, we're growing several of those at the moment. They do exist. Noongar product knowledge, we're working with a number of partners. We've got honey grower producer arrangements with Chinese. We're working with some Singaporean interests at the moment. Some of our food industry, we're supplying actual food, bush foods, the bush potato, the yolk we call it. We're growing a number of other products for nutrients and pharmaceuticals. So that's really the direction that the Noongar people want to go into integrate the mainstream farming behaviour, but also integrate the Noongar cultural worldview into that. So I think it's really a fantastic, exciting place for us to be in. We can really bring the health of the land back into a state where people again can really interact in a more cultural obligation environment, a cultural responsibility in caring for country. And that's really where we're at. So I'm out of time, so I'm happy to talk to people later about anything. So much to say at the same time. Thank you very much.
This talk this afternoon is actually reinforcing what Charlie and Walter are talking about, but we're actually going to get our hands dirty. And we're going to try and explain to you just in a simple set of slides how we can change the dynamics of our soil simply by a mistake. Okay, so... You want me to change the word? Yes, please. So, if you can't see it, it reads soil sponge and water shedding. What's it mean for, basically, not my soils, your soils? And we'll go into this in the next slide, please. Yep. So what's actually happened here is Pip Talk's not here from Torbay Catchment Group, and I do thank Pip because this has come out really quite well. So what Pip's done on the right-hand side, they've cut that for firebreak. On the left-hand side they've cut for firebreak. Right-hand side they've cut for hay. They've left the middle for residual. And this story is so simple, yet so powerful, and it will lead through into it. Thanks, Matt. So the soil temperature on the 12th of May this year at the airport was 25 degrees. If you notice here where this penetrometer is, we put a thermometer on the top of that grass. Within about 5 minutes, that soil temperature got up to 31 degrees. That side, where Pip's ceiling, it was 18 degrees. And it's the refraction, the short wave radiation coming down, the long wave radiation, retracted radiation going out. And this has a detrimental effect, a massive effect on our soil, but not just our soil. It's what lives underneath it, and that's what people don't really get a grasp of. You'll see in a minute what actually it looks like. Thanks, Mark. These are the two root zones. If you just like to press those buttons, it'll come up. Please. Keep going. Okay, so you can see on this side, the slash side, the topsoil is 9 centimetres, and the subsoil is totally different on that side there. In the slash, the topsoil is quite staggering. It is quite staggering. And if we lead into that, this is what... That one can go, thanks, Justin. Can we go to the next one, please? Yeah. So if we lead into this one, this is where the demonstration really starts, and if you keep going through them, Justin, they'll come up. So just keep rocking through those. So the soil pressure on this side at 10 centimetres was 1500 kPa. Soil pressure at 10 to 40 was 3000 kPa. The soil moisture here was 46% at 100 mils. At 10 to 40 centimetres, 21% moisture. Over here, soil pressure 300 at the top. Soil pressure 10 to 40, 1000 kPa. Soil moisture 0 to 10, 81%. Soil moisture at subsoil 81.5. Does anybody correlate that there's something different going on here? There's something different, isn't there? Because, you know, there's quite a staggering effect of how tight the soil is on the right-hand side, simply that this side has been left to run out to maturity, the grass is growing, and there's another story behind this to be had. We'll keep going, Justin, because I know we're running out of time. I'd like you to watch this. We'll run this through, Justin, these two live videos, so if you click this one and that one, please. Pretty hard to get good help these days, isn't it? So if you just click on that, Justin, if you click on that one and then that one too, please. And what you'll see now is you'll see where we pour a litre of water in each one of these holes. It's coming, mate. That one's not working, is it? Just click on that. Yes, you can. Just click on this in here, Justin. If you click in there and then click in there, they should both run. No,
Good. Anyone else?
just click in there and then click in there and they both will run.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, so I roughly know what I'm doing. So there's a litre of water being poured here on the slashed part. See that? We're getting a bit of an overflow. We're getting overflow out of it here. The time's running down on this one now. This one, and I really want you to watch this bottom one here. Now that's been there for about 4 seconds. Watch this. You can see it dissipating already. And we'll just watch these two, but we're just going to watch this right-hand side one on your right. And just see what happens to this moisture, the soil pressure, with just the total change of allowing things to grow through the summer months to allow that soil to recharge. The soil's recharging, it's got the soil sponge, it's taking the soil up, the moisture up, this is still sitting on the top, and in 42 seconds this is gone completely, and this stays there for another 30 odd, 1 minute, roughly 1 minute, or 60 seconds longer. So this has gone through the profile, this is still sitting on the top. So basically in what's happening here is we're not capturing those raindrops. We want to capture 95% of those raindrops to recharge in here. This is actually recharging. If we go to the next slide, please, Justin. What we're going to see here is this is this here and there. And what I'm talking about is soil aggregation. Is I go take this plant, hit it 3 times on my boot, and all the soil falls off. You'll see a little fibre in here. Same thing here, but you can see, it's not going to squawk on me, is it? Okay, but you can actually see the aggregation. See these little tiny strips in here? That's the soil glue, that's the soil aggregation. This is allowing that plant, that water to go straight into that profile, be sucked up, and that's why that soil on the right-hand side has got 81% moisture, not 45%. And that's why this soil's got 21%, and that's got 85.1% moisture, because it's actually recharged its soil sponge, and it's now allowing that microbial activity to get along. So if we move to the next slide, please, Justin. And if you do the same again, click on that one and that one. These are live images under at 660 magnification. Now you can see the total difference happening here. This guy here and that guy there are protozoas. You'll see I'll have to go searching in here. You can actually count the activity on the screen. I'd like you to count that. So what it's actually doing is it's demonstrating re-radiated heat, so it has an impact. It is on the management of the canopy of the plant that's had an impact, okay? And you've actually got this live biology where this biology is very quite tight. Okay, I've just been gone for 2 minutes, and this is really rapidly going along. Next, please, Justin. So what we did was, this is pretty crude, but we got these, put them in a bucket of water and washed them out. You can see the profiles. There's your soil sponge. That physically can't have any more than that because the canopy can't allow it to. This can have that depth because it had the canopy above it to do it. So it's increased the soil by, it's increased the density, decreased it in density, but increased the absorption and nutritional transfer within the plants. And I'm just about out of time, so the last slide is a real good friend of mine. He was a mate, and he said this, and I'd like you to read this because I think it's pretty true. Science is an evolution in itself. You have to look to nature to understand the truth of all things. And my mate's name was Albert Einstein. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody. I hope that gives you a practical look at what we're talking about.
So now we're changing pace a little bit to talk more about the gut microbiome. So this is about the interface between the microbiome and the gut. Yeah, next slide, thanks. So we've heard already today that 1 in 2 Australians have chronic disease, and we've got about 2/3 of our population of adults who are overweight or obese. And these can lead to the risks for different kinds of diseases like we've talked about earlier, and almost 1/3 of these can be prevented by the foods that we eat, and also with regard to our microbiome that we'll talk about in a moment. And only 1.5% of our budget is actually spent on prevention. So this is where the medical model is really waiting for diseases to happen and then we're treating them rather than us taking control or working with the system to change the system, so we are actually in a more preventative model. Next slide, thanks Justin. So it is all interrelated. There are trillions of microbiota, and I'll talk about those in a moment, living in our gut essentially, but also on our skin as well and other parts of our body. And what we eat influences the metabolites that they produce. It's those metabolites that now through new and emerging evidence is suggesting they have a real role in our overall systemic health. And remember those two slides of the sort of the nutrient-dense diet versus the energy-dense diet. So this is really impacting the health of our microbiota. Thank you. The microbiota is a collection of thousands of organisms of all different genera and phyla that basically live in our proximal and distal part of our colon and all throughout our digestive system, but we're going to really be concentrating on the part in the colon. The microbiome is the genes of those microorganisms as well as the metabolites that they produce, and this is called the microbiome. And we're doing work with Klaus Christofferson at the university looking at the microbiome. We're looking at it in children, we're looking at it in adults and in people who consume different types of diets, like the paleo diet versus a diet that's high in carbohydrates and whole grains. And basically we're doing this by collecting stool samples. So what we do with our stool samples is we're able to test what microbiota are there, okay, using a 16S ribosomal RNA genome sequencing, which we're running out of the Curtin, who are setting up with Klaus a microbiome centre. And then we can understand what they are doing by using sort of other metabolomic sequencing, by looking at the metabolites that we get from blood and urine samples. Mainly we're looking at blood samples at the moment. Now, if all of this is going well for individuals, they're in some symbiosis, and I think Charlie might have used that word before about sort of the ecosystem. But in a human sense, if those microbiome move away from health, it causes dysbiosis. Thanks. And this slide shows you just sort of in a cartoon-like way of what that could look like. So it could be flatulence, diarrhoea, constipation, pain, bloating in terms of the gut. Thanks. So we understand from the literature and from studies that really the way that the colonisation of the microbiome of all of us is dependent on a whole variety of things. It's whether you were born by caesarean section or you're born vaginally. It's whether your mother consumed maybe more probiotics during her pregnancy. It might be in the first few years of your life you were placed on antibiotics. All of these things are going to affect the gut microbiome. Your living environment now, whether you're a child that was maybe brought up on a farm versus in an urban setting, is also going to influence your microbiota. And essentially, the soil diversity and other factors that we're talking about today also encourages and changes what's living there. And I can't really spend much more time on that slide, but there's sort of a lot more behind that reasoning. And the breastfeeding and we talked about breastfeeding earlier in the first talk, the oligosaccharides which are in the breast milk of mothers actually help establish the lactobacillus and the bifidofactors that are beneficial to the growth and development of infants. So encouraging breastfeeding, as the World Health Organisation and our Australian guidelines do, is really important to establish in a child's their formative microbiome, which then will develop into an adult microbiome once we start feeding that child nourishing foods, assuming they're fed nourishing foods. So in this slide basically shows you the human, the little parts of the human cells and the human genes, and this is the contribution that the microbiome cells are in terms of the number of cells and their DNA. And also the most common phyla are the Bacteroidetes and the Firmicutes. Next slide, thanks. And these can weigh up to about 1.5 kilos of our body weight. Now this is a schematic of a digestive tract, the mouth there right down to, you know, the rectum and the anus, and it's us where we're actually collecting stool samples to look at the range of genera that is actually in the people's guts. Thanks. And we know from the literature and from previous studies that the microbiome has a role in a range of things, including our immunity. There's also more information now about the gut-brain axis, and it helps the actual metabolites that the microbiome produce can actually help in terms of mental health. There's also the regulation and the upkeep, really, of the cells of the colon is important by certain microbiome or microbiota as well, and they produce a sort of a mucus that maintains that integrity and also supports our metabolism. This slide is a little bit complicated, but really we're talking about the gut here, the colon. We're talking about the bacteria, their genes and their metabolites. It's their metabolites then that can create these signals that do other things in our body or improve or reduce the function of our metabolism. So it has a role in brain, liver, intestinal barrier and immune system, but we need to feed it every day. And if we don't provide, if we don't provide the fibres, which I'm going to talk about now, then both the signalling can be turned down and the changes in metabolism can occur. So the role of the diet is really important, and we need to feed our microbiome well every day. We need to feed whole grains, okay, so we're talking about carbohydrates made from grains, etc., fruits and vegetables, pulses and legumes. These are full of resistant starch. Now, resistant starch is something that's in our foods that goes through our digestive tract and we're unable to absorb it. So when it gets down into the colon, that's where the microbiota are actually able to ferment it and produce some of these metabolites. One being short-chain fatty acids, which actually help with that integrity of the mucosal cells, but also provides energy for those mucosal cells to function appropriately. Where do we get resistant starch from? Well, there's a variety of foods. Firm green bananas is one, and even green banana flour being one of the richest sources, but also legumes and potatoes and so forth. What is also important is what we do with our food. If we cook it and cool it, we actually increase the resistant starch. And if we take it for leftovers the next day and reheat it at work, we can, make sure you do that properly, is that you can actually even increase the resistant starch yet again. We need about 20 grams of resistant starch every day, okay? And the cookbook that we've designed sort of helps illustrate where that can come from. But we only get about 4 grams in our current diet. We have a reasonable amount of fibre as a nation, but we need to improve where it's coming from. And this slide sort of shows you that if there is a lack of dietary fibre in our diets, and especially resistant starch, the end part of that slide sort of shows some of the non-commensal microbiota actually eating those cells away in our colon, which can cause inflammation and different types of bowel disease. So we've designed a gut feeling cookbook that is based on our Australian dietary guidelines, and in that gut feeling cookbook we have days where you can actually see how much food for a female or a male they need to consume based on the number of serves from that Australian dietary guidelines. We also have a range of recipes that integrate the foods that we've been talking about to actually improve your intake of resistant starch every day so you can feed your gut microbiota. And we did this because the ABC asked us to do a show which was the Ask the Doctor show, and as we were designing that show we put the boys who were in the show on a really low Australian diet which didn't have a lot of fibre in it, and then we gave them this dietary book to actually improve their dietary intake of resistant starch. And when they were having the Australian diet, which was high in those discretionary foods we talked about, they didn't feel too good, but as soon as we put them onto sort of more fibre, they felt a lot better, sort of had frequent, regular bowel actions and all the rest of it, lots of energy. So lots of important reasons to look at this cookbook. Yep, last slide I think. So it's not suitable for everybody, and if you do think about sort of changing your diet, you're going to get some changes, probably in the toilet, because as soon as you start shifting fibre intake, you also need to be drinking water. And I think the last message is around that resistant starch is very important. We've got to look after our gut microbiota as we do our planetary microbiome in terms of soil health. So thanks everyone.